The morning Sarah collapsed in her kitchen, she had already lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks. Her hands trembled as she tried to pour water into a glass, missing entirely and watching the liquid splash across the counter. The room spun violently, and she gripped the edge of the sink, feeling her heart hammer erratically against her ribs. Through the window, she could see her husband Michael loading boxes into his truck, the same truck he had been using to move his things out of their home for the past month. She wanted to call out to him, to tell him something was desperately wrong, but pride kept her silent. Pride in the memory of his words 3 nights ago when he had announced he was leaving. He had looked at her with such cold indifference, as if their 15 years together had evaporated into nothing. The woman he was leaving her for was younger, he had said. More vibrant. More alive. Sarah had stood there in shock, unable to process how quickly her life was unraveling. Now, as her vision blurred and darkened at the edges, she realized that her body was unraveling too. She had ignored the warning signs for weeks. The constant nausea, the dizziness, the way food seemed to turn to ash in her mouth. She had attributed it all to stress, to the emotional devastation of watching her marriage crumble. But this was different. This was her body shutting down, systems failing one by one like lights going out in a vast building. Sarah's knees buckled, and she slid to the floor, her back against the cabinet. The ceramic tiles felt cool against her feverish skin. She could hear Michael's footsteps on the porch, the sound of the truck door slamming. Part of her wanted him to come back inside, to find her here and realize what he was doing. But another part, a deeper part, knew that he would not care. He had already moved on in every way that mattered. The tears came then, hot and bitter. She had been a good wife, or so she thought. She had supported his career, moved twice for his promotions, put her own dreams of finishing her degree on hold. She had loved him with everything she had, and somehow it had not been enough. The rejection cut deeper than any physical pain, burrowing into her chest and making it hard to breathe. Hours passed, though Sarah could not say how many. The sun shifted across the kitchen floor, painting geometric patterns of light and shadow. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her body too weak to move, her mind too fractured to form coherent thoughts. At some point, she heard the truck drive away. Michael had not even come inside to say goodbye. When her phone rang, the sound seemed to come from very far away. She had left it on the counter, impossibly out of reach. It rang and rang, then fell silent. Voicemail. It rang again 20 minutes later, the same persistent caller refusing to give up. Sarah recognized the ringtone. It was her friend Emma, probably calling to check on her after yesterday's tearful conversation. Gathering what little strength remained, Sarah began to crawl across the floor. Every movement sent waves of pain through her body. Her muscles screamed in protest, and twice she had to stop and rest, her cheek pressed against the cold tile. The phone seemed miles away, though it was only 10 feet. She thought about giving up, about just lying there and letting whatever was happening to her run its course. But something stubborn inside her refused to quit. Maybe it was anger at Michael for reducing her to this state. Maybe it was a fundamental survival instinct kicking in. Or maybe it was the faint hope that someone, somewhere, still cared whether she lived or died. She reached the counter and stretched her arm up, her fingers scrabbling blindly until they closed around the phone. Emma's contact photo smiled at her from the screen as the phone rang for the 3rd time. Sarah's finger hovered over the answer button, and in that moment, she made a choice. She chose to fight. She chose to live. She pressed the button and heard Emma's worried voice on the other end. "Help me," Sarah whispered, and then everything went black. Sarah woke to the smell of sage and sweet grass, unfamiliar and strangely comforting. Her eyelids felt heavy, as if weighted down with stones, but she forced them open. The ceiling above her was not the sterile white of a hospital room as she had expected. Instead, rough-hewn wooden beams crossed overhead, and sunlight filtered through windows draped with simple cotton curtains. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through her abdomen. "Easy now. Your body has been through a war." The voice was deep and calm, carrying an accent she could not quite place. Sarah turned her head slowly and saw an elderly man sitting in a chair beside her bed. His face was weathered like ancient leather, deeply lined but somehow serene. Long silver hair hung in 2 braids over his shoulders, and his dark eyes held a wisdom that seemed to reach back through generations. "Where am I?" Sarah's voice came out as a croak, her throat raw and dry. "You are on Pine Ridge Reservation, in my home," the man said. He reached for a cup of water and held it to her lips, supporting her head with surprising gentleness. "I am Chief Thomas Blackfeather. Your friend Emma brought you here 3 days ago when the hospital said there was nothing more they could do." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Nothing more they could do. She remembered fragments of the hospital now. The emergency room, the tests, the doctor's grave expression as he showed her scans of her liver. Acute liver failure, he had said. Possibly autoimmune, possibly stress-induced. She needed a transplant, but her condition was deteriorating too rapidly. The waiting list was long, and her chances were slim. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered. "Why would Emma bring me here?" Chief Blackfeather smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Your friend has known me for many years. She volunteers at our community center, teaches art to our children. When the doctors gave up hope, she remembered the old ways. She asked if I would try to help you." Sarah wanted to laugh, but it came out as a sob. The old ways. Traditional medicine. She was dying, truly dying, and she was lying in a stranger's home on a Native American reservation instead of a proper hospital. It seemed absurd, like something from a dream or a movie. But Emma had always been spiritual, always believed in things beyond what science could explain. "I'm going to die anyway," Sarah said, tears sliding down her temples into her hair. Michael was right. "I'm not vibrant anymore. I'm not alive. I'm just a broken thing nobody wants." The chief was quiet for a long moment, and when Sarah looked at him again, his expression had changed. There was a fierce intensity in his eyes now, a spark of something that reminded her of fire. "Your husband is a fool," he said simply. "And you are not broken. You are wounded, yes. Sick, yes. But a wounded warrior is not the same as a defeated one. The question is whether you will fight." Over the following days, Sarah learned what fighting meant in Chief Blackfeather's world. It meant drinking bitter teas made from roots she could not name. It meant sitting through ceremonies where he burned sacred herbs and sang songs in Lakota, the ancient words washing over her like waves. It meant listening to stories about his people, about survival and resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship. He told her about the Wounded Knee Massacre, about how his great-grandmother had survived by hiding under the bodies of the dead. He told her about the boarding schools that tried to erase their culture, about children forbidden to speak their own language or practice their own religion. He told her about the poverty and addiction that still plagued the reservation, about young people who saw no future and old people who refused to forget the past. "We are still here," he said one evening as they sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the Badlands in shades of gold and crimson. "Every day we choose to be here, to continue, to remember who we are. That is the greatest medicine. The will to continue." Sarah felt something shift inside her as she listened. Her pain, her humiliation, her sense of worthlessness began to feel smaller somehow. Not insignificant, but not all-consuming either. She had been so focused on what Michael had taken from her that she had forgotten what remained. Her intelligence, her kindness, her stubborn refusal to quit even when every cell in her body was failing. Chief Blackfeather introduced her to others on the reservation. Elders who had survived things that would have destroyed lesser people. Young mothers raising children alone, finding joy despite crushing poverty. Artists and teachers and activists who worked tirelessly to preserve their culture and build a better future. Each person she met was a testament to the power of resilience. "You think your husband destroyed you," the chief said one night as he prepared another pot of medicinal tea. "But he only destroyed an illusion. The illusion that your worth comes from someone else's love. Your worth is inherent. It cannot be given or taken away." On the 7th day of her stay, Chief Blackfeather announced that Sarah was ready for the healing ceremony. Emma had arrived that morning, her eyes red from crying, bringing news that made Sarah's blood run cold. Michael had filed for divorce and was already living with his new girlfriend. He had cleaned out their joint bank account, leaving Sarah with nothing. The house was in his name. Everything she had built over 15 years had vanished in an instant. Sarah had felt the familiar despair rising, threatening to pull her under. But then she looked at Chief Blackfeather's steady gaze and remembered his words about worth. She could not control what Michael did. She could only control her own response, her own choice to keep fighting. The ceremony took place in a small building behind the chief's house, a structure he called a ceremonial lodge. Inside, the air was thick with smoke from a central fire. Several other elders sat in a circle, their faces solemn in the flickering light. Chief Blackfeather helped Sarah to a place of honor, cushions arranged so she could sit comfortably despite her weakness. He began to speak in Lakota, his voice rising and falling in rhythms that seemed to match the beating of her heart. The other elders joined in, creating a harmony that resonated in Sarah's chest. She did not understand the words, but she felt their power. It was like nothing she had ever experienced, primal and sacred and utterly foreign to her suburban upbringing. Chief Blackfeather approached with a bundle of sage, the smoke curling around Sarah's face. He moved it over her body in specific patterns, and she felt heat radiating from areas she knew were diseased. Her liver, her kidneys, her failing heart. The smoke seemed to draw out poison, both physical and emotional. Tears streamed down her face as images flashed through her mind. She saw herself at 23, falling in love with Michael. She saw their wedding day, the promises they made. She saw the slow erosion of intimacy, the way they had become strangers sharing a house. She saw his face when he told her he was leaving, the absence of remorse or grief. And she saw herself, crumpled on the kitchen floor, choosing to reach for that phone instead of giving up. The chief began to apply poultices to her skin, warm and fragrant with herbs. His hands moved with practiced precision, pressing on points that sent jolts of sensation through her nervous system. Some of it hurt, sharp and immediate. But some of it felt like relief, like tension she did not know she was holding suddenly releasing. The body keeps the score, he said, switching to English. Every hurt, every betrayal, every moment you swallowed your pain instead of expressing it. Your body remembers. Your liver processes not just food and drink, but emotion. Anger, resentment, bitterness. These things can poison you as surely as any chemical. Sarah thought about all the times she had bitten back her frustration with Michael. All the times she had made excuses for his emotional distance, his criticism disguised as concern, his gradual withdrawal from their marriage. She had internalized it all, turned it inward, let it corrode her from the inside out. I was so angry, she whispered. At him, at myself. I didn't know how angry until now. Good, Chief Blackfeather said. Anger is honest. Anger is power. The question is what you do with it. Do you let it consume you, or do you transform it into something else? The ceremony lasted for hours. Sarah lost track of time, drifting in a state between waking and dreaming. She saw visions that might have been hallucinations from her failing body or might have been something more. She saw a great tree with deep roots, weathering storms that bent but could not break it. She saw a river carving through stone, patient and relentless. She saw a phoenix rising from ashes, a cliché made real and terrible and beautiful. When it finally ended, Sarah felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. The other elders filed out silently, each touching her shoulder or head as they passed, blessing her in their own way. Chief Blackfeather remained, banking the fire and tidying the space with unhurried movements. Will I live? Sarah asked him directly. She needed to know, needed to understand what all of this meant. The chief sat down across from her, his ancient face illuminated by the dying embers. I do not know the future. I am not a god, only a man who has learned a few things in his long life. What I have done is give your body a fighting chance. I have cleared away some of the spiritual poison so that physical healing becomes possible. But the rest is up to you and to forces beyond either of our control. What if I die anyway? Then you will die as a warrior, not as a victim. You will die knowing your own worth, carrying no man's rejection as a burden. That is not nothing. Sarah nodded, understanding. She had spent so long defining herself through Michael's eyes, measuring her value by his approval or lack thereof. The thought of his new girlfriend, younger and vibrant, had felt like proof of her inadequacy. But sitting here in this sacred space, she could see the lie clearly. Michael had not left because she was worthless. He had left because he was broken in his own way, chasing an illusion of happiness that would always be just out of reach. I want to live, Sarah said, and this time she meant it completely. Not just survival, but truly living. I want another chance. Chief Blackfeather smiled and helped her to her feet. Then we continue the work. 2 weeks into her stay on Pine Ridge Reservation, Sarah woke feeling different. The constant nausea that had plagued her for months was gone. Her mind felt clearer, sharper, as if a fog had lifted. When she sat up, the room did not spin. Her hands, when she held them out, were steady. Emma was sleeping in a chair by the window, her presence a constant comfort. She had taken leave from her job to stay with Sarah, refusing to abandon her friend when she needed her most. Sarah felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. This was love, she realized. Not the romantic kind she had lost, but something deeper and more enduring. The love of true friendship, unshakable and freely given. Chief Blackfeather arrived as the sun was rising, carrying his usual tray of teas and broths. He paused when he saw Sarah sitting upright, studying her with those penetrating dark eyes. You are better, he said. It was not a question. I feel better, Sarah confirmed. Stronger. Like maybe I'm not dying after all. The chief set down his tray and approached, pressing his fingers gently against her neck, her wrists, feeling her pulse. He placed his hand over her liver, and Sarah felt warmth radiating from his palm. After a long moment, he nodded. Your spirit has decided to stay. Your body is listening. This is good. Over the next days, Sarah began to participate more fully in life on the reservation. Chief Blackfeather insisted she take walks, short at first, then gradually longer. She explored the community, meeting people whose resilience humbled her. She visited the school where Emma volunteered, watching children laugh and play despite the poverty that surrounded them. She helped prepare meals, learning to make fry bread and wojapi from women who welcomed her without judgment. One afternoon, Chief Blackfeather took her to a place he called the Sacred Hills. They drove in his old pickup truck along dirt roads that seemed to lead nowhere, then climbed on foot to a rocky outcrop that overlooked miles of grassland and sky. The wind was fierce up there, pulling at Sarah's clothes and hair, but she felt alive in a way she had not felt in years. My grandfather brought me here when I was a boy, the chief said. After my father died. I was angry then, like you were angry. I wanted to know why the world was so cruel, why good people suffered while bad people prospered. What did he tell you? Sarah asked. He said that the wind does not ask permission before it blows. The rain does not apologize for falling. The seasons change without concern for our preferences. Life is not fair, and it was never meant to be. The question is not why do bad things happen, but how do we respond when they do. Sarah watched an eagle circle overhead, riding the thermals with effortless grace. She thought about Michael and his betrayal, about the life she had lost, about the woman she had been just a month ago. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone small and frightened, measuring her worth by another person's fickle affection. I don't want to be that person anymore, she said. The one who needed Michael to feel complete. Then don't be, Chief Blackfeather said simply. Every moment is a choice. Every breath is a new beginning. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the sun track across the sky. Sarah felt something breaking open inside her, not with pain but with relief. It was like she had been wearing armor she did not know was there, and now it was falling away, piece by piece. That evening, Emma showed her the divorce papers that had arrived. Michael wanted everything finalized quickly, wanted to move on with his new life. The house, the savings, even items that Sarah had brought into the marriage, he was claiming it all. His lawyer had included a letter suggesting Sarah should just sign without contest, given her medical condition and inability to afford legal representation. Sarah read the papers twice, feeling old anger try to resurface. But instead of the crushing despair she would have felt before, she felt only a cold clarity. Michael was showing her exactly who he was. A man who would kick someone when they were down, who would take advantage of her illness to strip her of everything. This was not love gone wrong. This was a fundamental lack of character. I'm going to fight him, Sarah said, looking up at Emma. Not for the money or the house. For me. Because I deserve better than to be trampled and discarded. Emma's face broke into a wide smile. There she is. There's my fighter. Chief Blackfeather, who had been listening from the doorway, nodded approvingly. The warrior awakens. Good. You will need that strength for what comes next. What comes next? Sarah asked. You return to your world. You face what needs to be faced. But you do not go alone, and you do not go as the person who left. You go as someone who has died and been reborn. Someone who knows her own power. The words thrilled and terrified Sarah in equal measure. She had been hiding here, sheltered by Chief Blackfeather's wisdom and the reservation's isolation. But eventually she would have to return to reality, to bills and lawyers and the wreckage of her old life. The thought was daunting. I'm scared, she admitted. Fear is wise, the chief said. Only fools feel no fear. But fear does not have to stop you. You can be afraid and still move forward. That is courage. 6 weeks after Emma had brought her to Pine Ridge Reservation, Sarah sat in a lawyer's office in Rapid City, South Dakota. Her skin had regained its color, and though she was still thin, she no longer looked like she was dying. The medical tests she had undergone the previous week had shocked her doctors. Her liver function, while not perfect, had improved dramatically. The acute failure had somehow stabilized. They had no scientific explanation for it, talked about spontaneous remission and the mysteries of the human body. Sarah knew better. She knew that Chief Blackfeather's remedies and ceremonies had given her body the chance it needed to heal. She knew that releasing her emotional poison had been as important as any physical treatment. She knew that choosing to live, truly live, had made all the difference. Now she was choosing to fight. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca whom Emma had found through her reservation contacts, reviewed the divorce papers with barely concealed disgust. "He's claiming you abandoned the marital home. Says you've been missing for weeks with no contact." "I was dying," Sarah said calmly. "I was receiving medical treatment. We have documentation for that. Medical records, testimony from Chief Blackfeather, Emma's sworn statement. Michael's claim won't hold up." Rebecca tapped her pen against the papers. "The real issue is that he's trying to claim everything based on his name being on the house and the primary bank account. But South Dakota is an equitable distribution state. You're entitled to half of all marital assets." Sarah had done her research. With Rebecca's help, she had discovered that Michael had been planning this for longer than he admitted. He had secretly moved money into accounts in his name only. He had convinced her to sign documents that she now understood were designed to limit her claims. He had been preparing to discard her for months. The betrayal should have hurt, but instead it just made her angry. The good kind of angry, the kind that fueled action instead of paralysis. "I want what I'm entitled to," Sarah said. "Not out of greed, but out of principle. He doesn't get to destroy me and walk away clean." Over the following weeks, Sarah fought on multiple fronts. She fought Michael's lawyers with Rebecca's help, refusing to be intimidated or rushed into a bad settlement. She fought her own body's remaining weaknesses, continuing the protocols Chief Blackfeather had taught her, building strength day by day. She fought her own doubts and fears, the voice in her head that still sometimes whispered that she was not good enough, not worthy of fighting for. But she also began to build. She enrolled in online classes to finish her degree. She started volunteering at the reservation's community center, teaching computer skills to adults who wanted to improve their employment prospects. She discovered talents and passions she had buried during her marriage, things Michael had subtly discouraged as impractical or silly. One evening, Chief Blackfeather invited her to a celebration. The reservation was honoring elders who had worked to preserve Lakota language and culture. Sarah sat in the audience, watching as men and women were recognized for their lifetime of service. When Chief Blackfeather's name was called, the applause was thunderous. He spoke briefly, thanking his community in Lakota before switching to English. "I have lived a long life," he said. "I have seen much pain and much beauty. I have learned that the greatest gift we can give each other is the truth of our own resilience. When we survive, we give others permission to survive. When we thrive despite hardship, we show others that thriving is possible." His eyes found Sarah in the crowd, and he smiled. She understood then that he had been showing her that very thing from the moment Emma brought her to his door. Survival was possible. Thriving was possible. She had been living proof of it for weeks without fully realizing it. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Sarah did not get everything she wanted, but she got enough. Enough to start over, to build a new life on her own terms. Michael had to split the assets equitably, had to acknowledge that his attempt to leave her with nothing was unconscionable. His new relationship had already fallen apart, Rebecca informed her with grim satisfaction. Apparently, the girlfriend had discovered he was still legally married and had been lying about many things. Sarah felt no satisfaction in his misery, only a quiet sense of justice. On her last night at Pine Ridge before returning to start her new life, Sarah sat with Chief Blackfeather on his porch. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by city lights, seeming close enough to touch. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You saved my life." The chief shook his head. "I did not save you. I showed you how to save yourself. There is a difference. Will I see you again?" "If you wish. You are always welcome here. You are part of our community now, part of our story of survival." Sarah felt tears on her cheeks, but they were clean tears, healing tears. "What Michael destroyed, you helped me rebuild. But better. Stronger." "Your husband destroyed nothing," Chief Blackfeather said gently. "He revealed. He showed you what was already broken so you could heal it. He showed you what you had been accepting so you could demand more. He showed you who you really are when everything else is stripped away." Sarah thought about that for a long moment. "A warrior," she said finally. "Yes. A warrior who has learned that the greatest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. The battle to believe in our own worth. The battle to choose life over despair. The battle to forgive ourselves and move forward." They sat in companionable silence until the moon rose, painting everything in silver light. Sarah thought about the woman who had collapsed on her kitchen floor, minutes from death in more ways than one. That woman was gone now, transformed by fire and ceremony and the unflinching compassion of strangers who had become family. In her place was someone new. Someone who had died and been reborn. Someone who knew her worth was not contingent on being chosen or desired. Someone who understood that love was not something you earned through perfection but something you gave and received freely. Someone who had looked death in the face and chosen life, not once but every single day. Sarah stood, ready to face whatever came next. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer broken. She was, finally and completely, free. "Thank you," she said again, and this time Chief Blackfeather accepted it with a nod. "Go forth and thrive," he said. "And when you meet others who are broken and dying, show them what I showed you. That survival is possible. That rebirth is real. That warriors are not born but made through choosing to fight when giving up would be easier." Sarah promised she would, and she kept that promise. For the rest of her life, whenever she met someone who was hurting, abandoned, or lost, she remembered those weeks on Pine Ridge Reservation. She remembered that a Lakota chief had seen worth in her when she saw none in herself. She remembered that the will to continue was the greatest medicine of all. And she continued, thriving in ways she had never imagined possible, living proof that what seems destroyed can be rebuilt, that what seems dead can be resurrected, that warriors are real and resilience is a choice we make every single day.